Hello, beautiful friends. I'm Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you connect with the love of your angels while you rest, relax, and fall asleep. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And in my waking hours, I do one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes. And you can learn more about this at my website, illuminatingSouls.com. And I decided to make a sleep podcast because for the past few years, I have been listening to various sleep podcasts every night as part of my self-care routine to help me fall asleep. And I have fallen in love with them. I am utterly delighted when I get to crawl into bed. I have a beautiful waking life, and I have to say I love getting to go to bed at the end of the day. It feels luxurious, it feels sacred, and I really look forward to bedtime, which amuses me to no end because when I was a kid, I hated bedtime. Oh, how life changes as we get older. So, sleep podcasts are a big part of my well-being. And so, a few months ago, I asked the angels to help me connect with sparks of inspiration because life was feeling a little bit flat. And one of the ideas that they brought forward was for this podcast. And I said to the angels, it sounds so lovely, but it has to be easy. I don't have the energy to effort my way through anything. And so I just started recording it one day, and I did the audio engineering myself, which may not come as a huge surprise to you because it's not professionally done. And I created a blanket fort. So I had heard from other people who did these podcasts that they would record in closets and things like that so that the acoustics would be cozy. So I was guided to take one of those cozy Sherpa blankets, that are all the rage right now. And what I do is I have a big monitor at my desk. And so I throw the blanket over the monitor and over me. And it kind of creates a tent or a blanket fort. And I record. I come and I whisper into the microphone for you, and I ask the angels to bring in all of this gorgeous energy. And that's how this podcast is born. I share this with you because I think sometimes on the journey of self-growth, we can get really caught up in achieving our goals and doing a lot. And we're always striving for something. And I want you to know here and now that you have permission to ask for it to be easy. You get to choose a path of ease whenever possible. There certainly are times in life when life is hard and it asks a lot of us. So there's times when ease is not an option on the menu of life. But there are often so many instances when ease is an opportunity. So as you get ready to drift off to sleep tonight, I invite you, if you're willing, to call in a state of grace and ease for yourself. And I don't know what that'll mean for you. Each of us has our own relationship with ease. I recognize that ever since I was young, I appreciated ease. I was one of those students. I never felt called to strive for the A. A B was fine. That's sort of been the way I've made it through the world. And your story is probably different. I share this with you, though, because as we get ready to call the angels in, I'm going to ask them to bring forward blessings of ease. And we'll see how that resonates for you. Be willing to receive. Be willing to experience through a new perspective. And if you're new to the world of angels, angels are divine, beloved messengers of God. They are beautiful celestial beings who embody unconditional love for us. And while you rest, the angels will be bringing to you waves and waves of divine love and healing. So you get cozy, snuggle on in to your comforter, fluffing your pillows just so. Close your eyes and take some nice deep breaths in and out. And allow your body to relax and let go. This is your time to drift off. This is your time to rest and replenish. And I'm going to call in the angels. They're already here. But I always like to say a prayer or an invocation to invite them forward. So beautiful angels on high, with an open heart and with a deep sense of gratitude, we invite you to join us here. And we are so grateful that you are already present in each and every breath. Angels, we ask that you create a sweet, loving space for our beautiful beloveds here to drift off into a good night's sleep. And while we are sleeping, we ask that you clear away any hardships that we no longer need to endure, that any worries that are unnecessary be lifted up into the highest realms where they can be transformed into light once again. Angels, we ask that you assist us in coming into divine right alignment with greater ease and grace wherever it is available to us. We know that this universe is filled with blessings for each one of us. Help us to awaken to the blessings that are on our path, to greater ease as we open to our divine purpose, greater ease as we make our way in the world and connect with the sparks of inspiration that are in our hearts. And so, dear ones, just take some nice deep breaths in and out. And imagine, if you will, that the angels have created a beautiful sphere of light for you. This light supports you. This light has been calibrated in service to your highest and best good. Your angels are aware of all that is transpiring in your life. They are aware of every step of your journey, and they are here to support you. If you have any prayers or intentions that you would like to offer up to God, to the angels, you can bring these forward in your heart right now, and the angels will amplify all that you bring into the circle of light right now. And as you do, allow waves of relaxation to move through you. You are doing so much better than you know. You are a blessing here on earth. You are one of the portals through which love flows into this world. And here's the thing to remember, that as a bringer of light, and if you hope that I'm talking about you, I am. As a bringer of light, you are someone that has intentionally incarnated into this time and space to amplify the loving consciousness in this world. And often, as bringers of light, we are really good at loving others. We are the counselors of our friends and families, right? We're the caregivers. We are the phone calls in the middle of the night, which hopefully you will not get tonight. And we're really good at giving love. But you know what happens is we are not always the best at receiving it. We spend so much time giving, we forget to exercise our receiving muscle. So this is your opportunity to just receive. There is a wellspring of love flowing specifically for you right now. Your angels are with you, and they love you beyond time and space. They are here to help ease anything that feels like a burden to you. And they are here to help you cultivate a deeper sense of well-being, of faith, and of hope for the days to come. So allow your angels to soothe you. Allow them to help you replenish and restore. You do not always need to use your energy to move forward. You can draw energy from the angels and from Source, from God. Just like the leaves of a tree draw from the sunlight, allow yourself to draw from the loving light the angels bring to you now. And just allow the sound of my voice and the love of your angels to help you settle into a sweet state of sanctuary, knowing that this is your time to rest. May your dreams be sweet, and may you come into a greater sense of ease and grace in whatever ways they are available to you that are in alignment with your highest and best good. Just imagine right now that sweet portals of potential are being created in your name. And in the days and weeks to come, they will find you. A phone call that comes out of the blue or an email that shows up with an opportunity you didn't even know was possible but delights your heart. Or even the kind of ease that comes when you've cleaned out your closet and looked through the pockets and find a $20 bill you had forgotten you'd stuffed there 2 years ago. You have permission to choose into ease whenever it is available to you. So just breathe in the divine vibration of ease as the angels bring it to you. You don't need to know what you're going to do with it or how it's going to show up. Just allow yourself to feel the vibration of ease, opening up your inner navigation, your inner GPS, to make it easier for you to cultivate a relationship with your path of ease and grace. And take a deep, deep breath in and out, coming into a state of harmony with the love that is streaming to you now. And while the angels are bringing this love to you, I'm going to read to you a bedtime story. So you drift off, and your angels will be with you, and I'll be keeping you company. Tonight I'm going to read to you from Edith Nesbitt's book, The Amulet. It was published in 1906. You know, I hadn't been familiar with her books. And I'm not sure how popular she was in America when I was growing up. I know she was very popular in the UK. And I didn't know her work until Otis Gray of the podcast Sleepy started reading some of her material. And in the first book I heard him read of hers was from The Amulet. And I was utterly enchanted. So a shout out to Otis Gray and the Sleepy podcast. If you haven't listened to it, definitely put it on your playlist because it is wonderful. I listen to it all the time to help me sleep. And so I'm going to read to you the Amulet. So this is chapter 1, the Samiad. And I should also say she references some of the earlier books that include the adventures of these children. So just go with it. And the Samiad is a sand fairy. And I believe that at the time of this book, he is the only sand fairy left. So chapter 1, the Samiad. There were once 4 children who spent their summer holidays in a white house, happily situated between a sand pit and a chalk pit. One day, they had the good fortune to find in the sand pit a strange creature. His eyes were on long horns like snails' eyes, and it could move them in and out like telescopes. It had ears like a bat's ears, and a tubby body covered with thick, soft fur. And it had hands and feet like a monkey's. It told the children, whose names were Cyril, Robert, Anthea, and Jane, that it was a Samiad, or a sand fairy. It was old, 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 and its birthday was almost at the very beginning of everything. And it had been buried in the sand for thousands of years. But it still kept its fairy likeness, and part of this fairy likeness was its power to give people whatever they wished for. You know, fairies have always been able to do this. Cyril, Robert, Anthea, and Jane now found their wishes come true. But somehow they never could think of just the right things to wish for, and their wishes sometimes turned out very oddly indeed. In the end, their unwise wishings landed them in what Robert called a very tight place indeed, and the Samiad consented to help them out of it in return for their promise never, never to ask it to grant them any more wishes, and never to tell anyone about it, because it did not want to be bothered to give wishes to anyone ever anymore. And at the moment of parting, Jan said politely, "I wish we were going to see you again someday." And the Samiad, touched by this friendly thought, granted the wish. The book about all of this is called 5 Children and It, and it ends up in a most tiresome way by saying the children did see the Samiad again, but it was not in the sand pit. It was, but I say no more. The reason that nothing more could be said was that I had not then been able to find out exactly when and where the children met the Samiad again. Of course, I knew they would meet it, because it was a beast of its word, and when it said a thing would happen, that thing happened without fail. How different from the people who tell us about the weather it is going to be on Thursday next. The summer holidays, during which the Samiad had been found and the wishes given, had been wonderful holidays in the country, and the children had the highest hopes of just such another holiday for the next summer. The winter holidays were beguiled by the wonderful happenings of the phoenix and the carpet, and the loss of these 2 treasures would have left the children in despair, but for the splendid hope of their next holiday in the country. The world, they felt, and indeed had some reason to feel, was full of wonderful things, and they were really the sort of people that wonderful things happened to. So they looked forward to the summer holiday. But when it came, everything was different and very, very horrid. Father had to go out to Manchuria to telegraph news about the war to the tiresome paper he wrote for, the Daily Bellower or something like that was its name. And Mother, poor dear Mother, was away in Madeira because she had been very ill. And the lamb, I mean the baby, was with her. And Aunt Emma, who was Mother's sister, had suddenly married Uncle Reginald, who was Father's brother, and they had gone to China, which is much too far off for you to expect to be asked to spend the holidays in, however fond of your aunt and uncle may be of you. So the children were left in the care of old nurse who lived in Fitzroy Street near the British Museum, and though she was always very kind to them and indeed spoiled them far more than would have been good for the most grown-up of us, the children felt perfectly wretched. And when the cab had driven off with Father and all of his boxes, with blankets and the aluminum mess kit inside it, the stoutest heart quailed, and the girls broke down altogether and sobbed in each other's arms, while the boys each looked out of one of the long, gloomy windows of the parlor and tried to pretend that no boy would be such a muff as to cry. I hope you noticed that they were not cowardly enough to cry till their father had gone. They knew he had quite enough to upset him without that. But when he was gone, everyone felt as if it had been trying not to cry all its life, and that it must cry now. So they cried. Tea with shrimp and watercress cheered them a little. The watercress was arranged in a hedge around a fat glass salt cellar, a tasteful device they had never seen before, but it was not a cheerful meal. After tea, Anthea went up to the room that had been Father's, and when she saw how dreadfully he wasn't there, and remembered how every minute was taking him further and further from her, and nearer to the war, she cried a little more. Then she thought of Mother, ill and alone, and perhaps at that very moment, wanting a little girl to put cologne on her head and make her set in cups of tea, and she cried more than ever. And then she remembered what Mother had said the night before she went away, about Anthea being the eldest girl, and about trying to make the others happy and things like that. So she stopped crying and thought instead. And when she had thought as long as she could bear, she washed her face and combed her hair, and went down to the others, trying her best to look as though crying were an exercise she had never even heard of. She found the parlor in deepest gloom, hardly relieved at all by the efforts of Robert, who, to make the time pass, was pulling Jane's hair, not hard, but just enough to tease. "Look here," said Anthea, "let's have a caucus." The word brought back memories of last summer holidays, and everyone groaned. They thought of the white house with the beautiful tangled garden, late roses, asters, marigolds, sweet mignonette, and feathery asparagus, of the wilderness, which someone had once meant to make into an orchard, but which was now, as Father said, 5 acres of thistles haunted by the ghosts of baby cherry trees. They thought of the view across the valley, where the lime kilns looked like Aladdin's palaces in the sunshine, and they thought of their own sand pit, with its fringe of yellowy grasses and pale string-stalked wild flowers, and the little holes in the cliffs that were the little sand martins' little front doors. And they thought of the free, fresh air smelling of thyme and sweetbriar, and the scent of the wood smoke from the cottages in the lane. And they looked round old Nurse's stuffy parlor, and Jane said, "Oh, how different it all is." It was. Old Nurse had been in the habit of letting lodgings till Father gave her the children to take care of, and her rooms were furnished for letting. Now it is a very odd thing that no one ever seems to furnish a room for letting in a bit the same way as one would furnish it for living in. The room had heavy dark red stuff curtains, the color that blood would not make a stain on, with coarse laced curtains inside. The carpet was yellow and violet, with bits of gray and brown oilcloth in odd places. The fireplace had shavings and tinsel in it. There was a very varnished mahogany chiffonier or sideboard, with a lock that wouldn't act. There were hard chairs, far too many of them, with crochet doilies slipping off their seats, all of which sloped the wrong way. The table wore a cloth of cruel green color with a yellow chain-stitch pattern round it. Over the fireplace was a looking-glass that made you look much uglier than you really were, however plain you might be to begin with. Then there was a mantel-board with maroon plush and wool fringe that did not match the plush. A dreary clock, like a black marble tomb. It was silent as the grave, too, for it had long since forgotten how to tick. And there were painted glass vases that never had any flowers in it, and a painted tambourine that no one ever played, and painted brackets with nothing on them. There were 2 books, last December's Bradshaw. And an odd volume of Palmeridge's commentary on Thessalonians. There were, but I cannot dwell longer on this painful picture. It was indeed, as Jane said, very different. "Let's have a caucus," said Anthea again. "What about?" said Cyril, yawning. "There's nothing to have anything about," said Robert, kicking the leg of the table miserably. "I don't want to play," said Jane, and her tone was grumpy. Anthea tried very hard not to be cross, and she succeeded. "Look here," she said, "don't think I want to be preachy or a beast in any way, but I want to do what Father calls define the situation. Do you agree?" "Fire ahead," said Cyril without enthusiasm. "Well then, we all know the reason we're staying here is because Nurse couldn't leave her house on account of the poor learned gentleman on the top floor, and there was no one else Father could entrust to take care of us. And you know it's taken a lot of money. Mother's going to Madeira to be made well." Jane sniffed miserably. "Yes, I know," said Anthea in a hurry, "but don't let's think about how horrid it all is. I mean, we can't go to things that cost a lot, but we must do something. And I know there are heaps of things you can see in London without paying for them, and I thought we would go and see them. We're all quite old now, and we haven't got the lamb." Jane sniffed harder than before. "I mean, no one can say no because of him, dear pet, and I thought we must get Nurse to see how quite old we are, and let us go out by ourselves, or else we shall never have any sort of time at all. And I vote we see everything there is, and let's begin by asking Nurse to give us some bits of bread, and we'll go to St. James Park. There are ducks there. I know we can feed them, only we must make Nurse let us go by ourselves." "Hurrah for liberty," said Robert, "but she won't." "Yes, she will," said Jane unexpectedly. "I thought about that this morning, and I asked Father, and he said yes. And what's more, he told old Nurse we might, only he said we must always say where we wanted to go, and if it was right she would let us." "Three cheers for thoughtful Jane," cried Cyril, now roused at last from his yawning despair. "I say let's go now." So they went, old Nurse only begging them to be careful of crossings and to ask a policeman to assist in the more difficult cases. But they were used to crossings, for they had lived in Camden Town and knew the Kentish Town Road where the trams rush up and down like mad at all hours of the day and night, and seem as though, if anything, they would rather run over you than not. They had promised to be home by dark, but it was July, so dark would be late indeed and long past bedtime. They started to walk to St. James Park, and all their pockets were stuffed with bits of bread and the crusts of toast to feed the ducks with. They started, I repeat, but they never got there. Between Fitzroy Street and St. James Park there are a great many streets, and if you go the right way, you will pass a great many shops that you cannot possibly help stopping to look at. The children stopped to look at several with gold lace and beads and pictures and jewelry and dresses and hats and oysters and lobsters in their windows, and their sorrow did not seem nearly so impossible to bear as it had been in the best parlor at number 300 Fitzroy Street. Presently, by some wonderful chance turn of Robert's, who had been voted captain because the girls thought it would be good for him, and indeed he thought so himself, and of course Cyril couldn't vote against him because it would have looked like a mean jealousy. They came into the little interesting criss-crossy streets that held the most interesting shops of all, the shops where live things were sold. There was one shop window entirely filled with cages and all sorts of beautiful birds in them. The children were delighted till they remembered how they had once wished for wings themselves and had had them, and then they felt how desperately unhappy anything with wings must be if it's shut up in a cage and not allowed to fly. They went on, and Cyril tried to think out a scheme for making his fortune as a gold digger at Klondike, and then buying all the caged birds in the world and setting them free. And then they came to a shop that sold cats, but the cats were in cages, and the children could not help wishing someone would buy all the cats and put them on hearth rugs, which are the proper places for cats. And as they passed more stores, they did not stop at any more cat or dog or bird shops, but passed them by. They stood there on the pavement, a cause of some inconvenience to the passer-bys, and thus beguiled the time with conversation. Cyril was leaning his elbow on the top of a hutch that had seemed empty when they had inspected the whole edifice of hutches one by one, and he was trying to reawaken the interest of a hedgehog that had curled itself into a ball earlier in the interview, when a small, soft voice just below his elbow said, quietly, plainly, and quite unmistakably, not in any squeak or whine that had to be translated, but in downright common English, "Buy me, do. Please buy me." Cyril started as though he had been pinched and jumped a yard away from the hutch. "Come back, oh, come back," said the voice rather louder, but still softly. "Stoop down and pretend to be tying up your bootlace. I see it's undone as usual." Cyril mechanically obeyed. He knelt on one knee on the dry, hot, dusty pavement, peered into the darkness of the hutch, and found himself face to face with the Samiad. It seemed much thinner than when he had last seen it. It was dusty and dirty, and its fur was untidy and ragged. It had hunched itself into a miserable lump, and its long snail eyes were drawn in quite tight so that they hardly showed at all. "Listen," said the Samiad in a voice that sounded as though it would begin to cry in a minute. "I don't think the creature who keeps this shop will ask a very high price for me. I've bitten him more than once, and have made myself look as common as I can. He's never had a glance from my beautiful, beautiful eyes. Tell the others I'm here, but tell them to look at some of those low common beasts while I'm talking to you. The creature inside mustn't think you care much about me, or he'll put a price upon me far, far beyond your means. I remember in the dear old days last summer you never had much money. Oh, I never thought I should be so glad to see you. I never did." It sniffed and shot out its long snail's eyes expressly to drop a tear well away from its fur. "Tell the others I'm here, and then I'll tell you exactly what to do about buying me." Cyril tied his bootlace into a hard knot, stood up, and addressed the others in firm tones. "Look here," he said, "I'm not kidding, and I appeal to your honor, an appeal which in this family was never made in vain. Don't look at that hutch, look at the white rat. Now, you're not to look at that hutch, whatever I say." He stood in front of it to prevent mistakes. "Now get yourselves ready for a great surprise. In that hutch, there is an old friend of ours. Don't look. Yes, it's the Samiad, the good old Samiad. It wants us to buy it. It says you're not to look at it. Look at the white rat and count your money. On your honor, don't look." The others responded nobly. They looked at the white rat till they quite stared him out of countenance, so that he went and sat up on his hind legs in the far corner, and hid his eyes with his front paws, and pretended he was washing his face. Cyril stooped again, busying himself with the other bootlace, and listening for the Samiad's further instructions. "Go in," said the Samiad, "and ask the price of lots of other things, and then say, 'What do you want for that monkey that lost its tail, the mangy old thing in the third hutch from the end?' Oh, don't mind my feelings. Call me a mangy monkey. I've tried hard enough to look like one. I don't think he'll put a high price on me. I've bitten him 11 times since I came here, the day before yesterday. If he names a bigger price than you can afford, say you wish you had the money." "But you can't give us wishes. I've promised never to have another wish from you," said the bewildered Cyril. "Don't be a silly little idiot," said the Sand Fairy in trembling but affectionate tones, "but find out how much money you've got between you, and do exactly what I tell you." Cyril, pointing a stiff and unmeaning finger at the white rat so as to pretend that its charms alone employed his tongue, explained matters to the others, while the Samiad hunched itself and bunched itself and did its very best to make itself look uninteresting. Then the 4 children filed into the shop. "How much do you want for that white rat?" asked Cyril. 8 pence was the answer. "And the guinea pigs?" 18 pence to 5 bob, according to the breed. "And the lizards?" 9 pence each. "And toads?" 4 pence. "Now look here," said the greasy owner of all this caged life with a sudden ferocity, which made the whole party back hurriedly onto the wainscoting of the hutches with which the shop was lined. "Look here. I'm not going to have you coming in here and turning the whole place out, prizing every animal in stock just for your larks. So don't think of it. If you're a buyer, be a buyer. but I never had a customer yet as wanted to buy mice and lizards and toads and guineas all at once, so out you go." "Oh, wait a minute," said the wretched Cyril, feeling how foolishly yet well-meaningly he had carried out the Samiad's instructions. "Just tell me one thing. What do you want for the mangy old monkey in the third hutch from the end?" The shopman only saw in this a new insult. "Mangy young monkey yourself," he said. "Get along with your bloomin' cheek, out you goes." "Oh, don't be so cross," said Jane, losing her head altogether. "Don't you see he really does want to know that?" "Yeah, does he indeed?" sneered the merchant, when he scratched his ear suspiciously, for he was a sharp businessman and he knew the ring of truth when he heard it. His hand was bandaged, and 3 minutes before he would have been glad to sell the mangy old monkey for 10 shillings. "Now he does he? Then £2.10's my price. £2.10 down on the nail, or out you go." The children looked at each other. 23 shillings and 5 pence was all they had in the world, and it would have been merely 3 and 5 pence but for the sovereign which father had given to them between them at parting. "We've only got 23 shillings and 5 pence, said Cyril, rattling the money in his pocket. 23 farthings in someone's own cheek, said the dealer, for he did not believe that Cyril had so much money. There was a miserable pause, and then Anthea remembered and said, "Oh, I wish I had £2.10. "So do I, miss, I'm sure," said the man with bitter politeness. "I wish you had, I'm sure." Anthea's hand was on the counter. Something seemed to slide under it. She lifted it. There lay 5 bright half-sovereigns. "Why, I have got it after all," she said. "Here's the money. Now let's have the monkey, I mean." The dealer looked hard at the money, but he made haste to put it in his pocket. "I only hope you come by it honest," he said, shrugging his shoulders. He scratched his ear again. "Well," he said, "I suppose I must let you have it, but it's worth thriple the money," and he slowly led the way out to the hutch, opened the door gingerly, and made a sudden fierce grab at the Samiad, which the Samiad acknowledged in one last long lingering bite. "Here, take the brute," said the shopman, squeezing the Samiad so tight that he nearly choked it. "It's bit me to the marrow, it have." The man's eyes opened as Anthea held out her arms. "Don't blame me if it tears your face off its bones," he said, and the Samiad made a leap from his dirty, horny hands, and Anthea caught it in hers, which were not very clean, certainly, but at any rate were soft and pink, and held it kindly and closely. "But you can't take it home like that," Cyril said. "We shall have a crowd after us." And indeed 2 errand boys and a policeman had already collected. "I can't give you nothink, only a paper bag like what we put the tortoises in," said the man grudgingly. So the whole party went into the shop, and the shopman's eyes nearly came out of his head when, having given Anthea the largest paper bag he could find, he saw her open it, and the Samiad carefully creeped into it. "Well," he said, "if that there don't beat all. But perhaps you've met the brute before." "Yes," said Cyril affably. "He's an old friend of ours." "If I'd known that," the man rejoined, "you shouldn't have had him under twice the money." The children, trembling in agitation and excitement, carried home the Samiad trembling in its paper bag. When they got it home, Anthea nursed it and stroked it, and would have cried over it if she hadn't remembered how it hated to be wet. When it recovered enough to speak, it said, "Get me sand, silver sand, from the oil and color shop, and get me plenty." They got the sand, And they put it and the Samiad in the round bath together, and it rubbed itself and rolled itself and shook itself and scraped itself and scratched itself and preened itself till it felt clean and comfy. And then it scrabbled a hasty hole in the sand and went to sleep in it. The children hid the bath under the girl's bed and had supper. Old Nurse had got them a lovely supper of bread and butter and fried onions. She was full of kind and delicate thoughts. When Anthea woke the next morning, the Samiad was snuggling down between her shoulders and Jane's. "You have saved my life," it said. "I know that man would have thrown cold water on me sooner or later, and then I should have died. I saw him wash out a guinea pig's hutch yesterday morning. I'm still frightfully sleepy. I think I'll go back to sand for another nap. Wake the boys and this dormouse of a Jane, and when you've had your breakfasts, we'll have a talk." "Don't you want any breakfast?" asked Anthea. "I dare say I shall pick a bit presently," it said, "but sand is all I care about. It's meat and drink to me, and coals and fire and wife and children." With these words, it clambered down by the bedcloths and scrambled back into the bath, where they heard it scratching itself out of sight. "Well," said Anthea, "anyhow, our holidays won't be dull now. We found the Samiad again." "No," said Jane, beginning to put on her stockings. "We shan't be dull, but it'll be only like having a pet dog now that it can't give us wishes." "Oh, don't be so discontented," said Anthea. "If it can't do anything else, it can tell us about megatheriums and things." And that's the end of the first chapter of the Amulet. And you got to meet the children and the Samiad. And there's some really wonderful adventures coming up in the book. As a little preview, the Samiad helps them find this magical amulet that allows them to time travel. It takes them to Babylon and Atlantis. So there's some really good stuff coming up in future chapters, so stay tuned. But in the meanwhile, you go ahead and drift off to sleep. And may your dreams be sweet and magical. I love books like this because they remind us of the magic in the world. So even if things like sand fairies don't exist in 3D reality, we can certainly visit them in our daydreams and in our sleeping dreams and all the places in between. Because I know that you are somebody who remembers magic and daydreams and the sweetness of life. So you have a good night's sleep. You rest well. May you feel the love of your angels. May you know that you are loved and you are precious in all the world. I'm so deeply grateful for you. So you be well, and we'll connect again soon. Sweet dreams.